Just thinking here this past week, I had a conversation with another believer, and they were discussing, in particular, child care, child training, and the difficulty as you have more children to put time into each child that you have. It's pretty easy to put a lot of focus into 1, 2, or 3 children, but as the family size grows, there's a concern that you aren't doing enough and investing enough in the someone gets left behind. And they were wondering if it was not that if it was worth the effort of having a large family, but if it was wise, or they were just struggling with that. And just thinking about that, I had been reading through 1 Corinthians, and a verse that we're all really familiar with, I'm sure. In chapter 15, verse 58, it says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast and immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." So, when a verse starts off with "therefore," children, my kids aren't here, so they can't participate. They are here. They'll be here in a minute. Does anyone know what "therefore" means? Kind of an old English. Do you know what "therefore" means? Yes. What was just so? If you read a verse that says "therefore," I think it's a good idea to go back and read what came before that. So before, it means as a result of or because of this. So if you go back a few verses, in verse 58, it's talking about be steadfast and immovable, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. So the "therefore" is telling you why your labor is not in vain and why we should be abounding in the work of the Lord. So I'll pick up in chapter 15, verse 51. 1 Corinthians 15. I'm sorry. Yeah. I tend to mumble, and I will never be a public speaker, so it's a good thing I don't work with my mouth. But in chapter 15, verse 51, it says, "Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must be put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ." So, the confidence and the reason, the purpose that we have knowing our labor is not in vain is because there's a victory over death. Death is no longer the end, so death is defeated. And because of that, we know the physical, earthly things that we are doing are for an eternal purpose. And in Colossians 3:23 it says, we all know this verse too, "And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord, and not unto men." And in everything, we try to teach and train our kids, in everything in life, there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. You can do something, the correct thing with the wrong attitude. But if you have that hard attitude of doing it to the Lord and not as unto men, then your labor is not in vain in the Lord. And it's because we have the hope of that resurrection that life has purpose, much more purpose than beyond this world. And just thinking, I don't even know if I mentioned, my sister, she had gotten married about 9 years ago, but she married a man who was a good bit older than her. She wasn't walking with the Lord at the time, and she would tell you that, and she is following the Lord now. But her husband passed away about 3 weeks ago. He was he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's probably about a year ago, and he had progressed pretty quickly. And we just had his celebration of life ceremony yesterday, and it just brings into really stark clarity the importance of what's important in life, because we talk about life is but a vapor, and thinking back to a conversation I had this past week, we aren't responsible for the outcome of situations, but what we are accountable for, what we are responsible for, is how we carry out those commands from the Lord. And it says here, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable. So when it says, children, when it says immovable, does that mean sit still and do nothing and let the Lord work around you? No, it says, continuing, it says, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Be proactive, be mindful of the things that you're doing. And I think back to my childhood. You think you know a good bit when you're younger, and the older you get, I remember older people saying this: the older you get, the more you realize how little you knew, and it's incredibly true. And a wise son or a wise daughter realizes that, and the sooner you can realize that, there's so much more opportunity to serve the Lord and to grow in faith, and to know that your labor is not in vain. Because if you're doing whatever you're doing, if you're doing it as to the Lord, it's not in vain. The book, we're in the chapters of the book now. The Lord knows the whole story, and we're called in faith to carry out our mission as parents and to trust the rest of the Lord, and not focus on the outcome, but focus on what we are called to do. And beyond that, that's all we can do. And I think just the encouragement I got from reading this verse was, our labor is not in vain. We serve a perfect Creator who knows all things and is more than capable of meeting us at our shortcomings, our place of need. And it's just a reminder to me to be immovable, yes, in our faith and our purpose, but not immovable in the sense that we do nothing. We are always abounding in God's work. And each one of us needs to be encouraged to know our labor is not in vain.